Hello, everyone. This is Danny Haifong, and you are tuned in to episode number 3 of the Internationalist transmission. Let me know how I sound and how I look. All of our guests are waiting to come on. I know that there's always a little bit of a lag with the YouTube, so I'm just going to let that um, come on. But it's so good to be with you all tonight. We have an incredible panel of guests. We're going to have a really fun, really interesting conversation about the U.S.-led assault on state-affiliated media, something that has affected all of us personally, and of course has affected all of us, all of us participating in the panel personally, but it has affected all of us around, both here and around the world, when it comes to themes such as censorship, when it comes to the US's endless war agenda. So, I'm just going to give a brief introduction as to what we are going to be talking about tonight. So over the next hour, we're going to be talking about something that's been going on since the election of Donald Trump in 2016, which is the US-led assault on state-affiliated, so-called state-affiliated media. That's a real derogatory term for media that comes from countries, Russia, China, Iran, and others that the United States doesn't like. And it really is a campaign of censorship that serves what I see as 3 essential purposes. It serves the purpose of reproducing the U.S.'s endless war agenda, in terms of its aggression toward Iran, China, Russia. It also serves the agenda of censorship to basically silence any independent voice, both here and abroad, that challenges that agenda. And then it also, something that's not talked about a lot, it also puts a real stain on any efforts to defend publicly funded media, because anything that's considered state affiliated means that there's government regulation in that media. And we know here in the United States and in the Western world, we have private for-profit corporations on social media and these streaming platforms that are going wild with censorship right now. So this started in 2016 with the election of Donald Trump, with Russiagate. And what we've seen since then is a constant campaign to label journalists and the outlets that they write for as attached to the Russian government, as being puppets of the Chinese government or the Iranian government. It started with the shady organization Prop or Not, which was peddled by the Washington Post. Outlets like Black Agenda Report, Naked Capitalism, and all sorts of outlets on the left were labeled as dupes of Russia and suppressed accordingly. And then over the last few years, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook have all been labeling RT, Sputnik, Press TV, CGTN as state-affiliated media, and then censoring them in the algorithms, shadow banning Twitter accounts, completely removing Twitter accounts, completely removing social media accounts. This has been a real widespread campaign. That's a huge issue. But with no further ado, I want to definitely bring on the guests. We have folks that I respect dearly. We're going to have a great conversation about the who, what, where, when, and why of all of this. I'll just bring them all in now. What's going on, everyone? How are you all?
Hello.
Hi, Danny.
Hi.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us on.
Great. Yeah, so we got Richard Medhurst, JingJing. We have Lee Camp. And so, you all have a lot of experience with this problem, with this campaign of censorship. I myself, had today was just locked out of my Twitter account for defending Wyatt, Wyatt Reed, a great journalist who's covering Nicaragua and the elections there. And, I was removed because I used the same words as our Russiagate fanatic friend Keith Olbermann, who condemned Wyatt as being a lover, a whore for dictators. And I was suppressed for that. But I know all of us have very specific experiences with this campaign of censorship against state-affiliated media. And I want to just go around and for you all to give your initial thoughts, impressions, and reactions to this, given your personal experience and given just the overall political climate that we find. So, and you guys, please introduce yourselves as well. And we'll start with Lee JingJing and just go around.
Thank you, Danny. Maybe the reason you let me introduce myself first is because I have the privilege to have the label state affiliate media under my name on Twitter. Maybe I'm the only person that among all of you have this privilege. It's quite funny. So for those of you who are watching this live stream now, my name is JingJing. I'm a Chinese journalist. I got my journalism degree both in China and the UK. I've been working as a journalist in China for 8 years now. And this live stream comes at a perfect time because November the 8th is Journalist Day in China. And all of us celebrating this festival by writing and pitching more stories and working overnight. So, and I'm very happy, very honored to joined by you guys, Richard and Lee Camp. I love your contents, big fan. And also, so this Twitter, I will start why I got this label is quite funny because currently I'm working for CGTN, the China Global Television Network, but I also worked for other media before this. And this Twitter account, I've been using it for 10 years now. I started in 2011. It's my personal account. And I didn't use it constantly over the past few years, but just a few months ago, when my followers was growing steadily, every 100 every week, and suddenly Twitter didn't even ask my opinion. So, okay, we're gonna give you this label, your state affiliate media, even though I'm just a normal employee working for CGTN. CGTN have employees, thousands of employees across the world, but I'm the one who got it, together with several prominent hosts who have way more decades of experience than me. So it's quite funny. But so ever since I got this label, the numbers of my followers stopped growing for quite a long time. My engagement, my views all drop significantly. So basically, the label will give an effect to your account. They will reduce the number of people who are seeing your content, and they cannot. And I just got a label. I know people whose accounts being shut down. I know Uyghurs from Xinjiang who are telling our culture, like Uyghur culture, Uyghurs lifestyle, lighthearted vlogs on Twitter, and their accounts just got directly shut down without reasons. So that's what they're doing. They probably cannot find any evidence that I violated any regulations of Twitter. So they cannot shut down, but they decide to give me this label. But I'm just the one got a label. But I saw so many people, Chinese or expats living in China, who decided to come out and speak out the truth, what they're seeing, their real life here. Their accounts being shut down. If their accounts cannot be shut down, they will be labeled, they will be called as CCP trolls. You are paid by Chinese government to say positive, good things about China. And that's for normal Chinese or expats. For me, who is a journalist working for CGTN, there's see, you're a mouthpiece. You don't have your own opinion. Everything you said is not your life. You are paid to say this. So it's a way to discredit the voices from China. Maybe I can later deliberate more on this, but maybe this is for brief introduction about myself. I will leave the time for Lee and Richard. I won't take too much time from our other guests.
Well, I want to go to Lee because, Lee, you've done work with RT. Your show Redacted Tonight is very popular. And RT was one of the first victims of this. It was forced to register under FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And I mean, Russiagate was the sort of the spark for this particular form of censorship. So yeah, Lee, what are your initial reactions? What are your initial thoughts to all of this?
Yeah, there's so much to say. I mean, the foreign agent thing is hilarious. That statute that people have to register as foreign agents is meant for people who are literally lobbyists for other governments, which did not apply to media networks until they decided to do it to RT recently. That's when they started that. And AIPAC, which is literally the Israel lobbying arm in Washington, does not register as a foreign agent. So, I mean, that's laughable. But yeah, I came to RT because I can't say the things I want to say on other networks. You cannot really, on American media, or really almost all channels in American television, very few, can you be anti-war, anti-corporate, anti-Wall Street, any of that stuff. You might see a little of it, but you're not going to see a regular daily or weekly show talking about those kind of issues in that way. And so I ended up at one of the only American networks that would have me, that would allow that kind of discussion. And around 2016, big surprise, my Facebook was where I had really put a lot of my energy and everything to build up my Facebook. So my Facebook page was at 330,000 followers. People who had actively said, I want to hear everything you're posting on your Facebook page. And so immediately in 2016, that started only going down. I was getting 5,000 a week. It started only going down, meaning they were unsubscribing people as fast as they're subscribing. And they stopped showing my posts to most people. I used to get tens of thousands of shares on every post. Now I'm lucky if I get a few hundred. So it was kind of a form of shadow banning. You're not deleted. They're not telling you did anything wrong. They're just not showing your post to people. And I think we all suffer from that. And then there's the state affiliated thing, which hasn't been done to my personal page, luckily, but it's been done to all the Redacted Tonight, all the TV show stuff that's out there, the YouTube, the Twitter. It says state affiliated, which and on YouTube it says is fully or partially funded by Russia, which is hilarious because all of the media networks in the United States are fully or partially funded by weapons contractors, or which are basically the U.S. military. I mean, they are the ones really doing state propaganda, and yet we're labeled as state propaganda. So, I mean, that's so Orwellian as well. And then just, I don't want to take up all the time, but just the last point I'll make is what you ended up with RT America is a lot of journalists and people and talking heads who had been banned from other networks or other outlets because they were usually anti-war, but, anti-war, anti-corporate. You ended up with Jesse Ventura, who MSNBC had given him a major contract to be one of their main voices. And then the Iraq war kicks off in 2002. They find out he's anti-war. They paid him upwards of $10 million just to go away, just to not be on their network. They paid him just to get out of the contract because they can't have anti-war voices on one of the biggest news networks in America, who's supposedly the left-wing network. Chris Hedges is at RT America, former Pulitzer Prize winning journalist at the New York Times, came out against the Iraq war, was forced out after that. And the list is, there are career graveyards filled with journalists who tried to be anti-war in America, and they just get kicked off their networks. People like Phil Donahue and so many others. So that's what you end up with is RT is one of the few places where I can speak my mind. I've never been told what to say. I've never been told to say anything, not to say anything. And other networks can't say that. They're constantly told what they're allowed to speak about.
Richard, the floor is yours.
Hi, Danny. Thank you so much for having me on. It's really such a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Lee. It's just, I really love this topic because there's so much to say here. So just to introduce myself, my name is Richard Medhurst. So I'm half English, half British. I actually started in journalism with my own YouTube channel. So and Twitter, actually. I built both of them up and they grew to be quite successful, thankfully. And afterwards, I started with Press TV and RT recently. And also I've had the privilege of writing a bit in Black Agenda Report and also soon in El Mayadeen, which is a very famous Lebanese outlet. But yeah, I mean, when Lee was talking about this mouthpiece term that they use, I find that so hilarious. It sounds like Mike Pompeo writing these comments. It's incredible. And I really, I couldn't agree more with what Lee just said. You can't go on other networks in the UK or in the US or in most of Western Europe and say these things. You'll have some segments once in a while that are anti-war or anti-Israel or anti-Zionism, but it's just, it's once in a blue moon. It's not something you can do regularly. And I don't see too many of the oh, you're a mouthpiece comments, like Mike Pompeo typing away. But I do see them sometimes, and I don't think I think even the trolls know that, I built up my own thing first. And so this idea that I went to Press TV and RT and then got paid to change my opinion, which would be being a mouthpiece, is ridiculous. You can go back at my YouTube, my own thing. No one is pulling any puppet strings there, I can assure you. And I'm saying the same things that I say everywhere. So I just view it as having been given a bigger platform. So my message and the message of millions across the world, in the global south, can be further disseminated. And I think that's a very important thing. And of course, this is at the end of the day, these are just ad hominem attacks. It's a personal attack. It's like you're a mouthpiece. You're controlled by Iran or Russia, whatever. It's a personal attack because they have nothing of substance, of value to respond to the arguments being made. They have nothing at all, and the idea is that you have no integrity, because a journalist, is supposed to have a duty to the truth, right? And if you're peddling propaganda, then that's not necessarily the truth, is it? And so their idea is that you're someone who's dishonest. You're paid to say what you're saying, and this is categorically untrue. I think all of us, we have our own independent platforms, and if you go and look at what we say on those, it's the same thing that we say elsewhere. So it's just really a question of being given. Yeah, it's just a question of being given a megaphone, and that's really a tool that should be embraced. And I just think it's hilarious because they talk about free press in the West and all these lovely standards they have. Man, I wouldn't last 5 minutes at Sky News or BBC. You just can't criticize Israel. They won't even cover the Assange thing. I could never in a lifetime have covered the Assange trial like I did at BBC or something like that. Just no way. I could never say the things about Palestine that I say over there. It just doesn't work. And of course, then there are many other topics. But yeah, you get the gist of it. And I mean, in terms of what they've done to me, well, they demonetized my YouTube channel, which was very nice for no reason. This was when I was talking about the normalization just before the normalization, it was these settlements they wanted to build in the West Bank, the additional ones, and other things. I mean, this is the best one, right? They just literally took down the entire Press TV website. Like, they didn't knock it off the air. They took the domain. Like, if you go to presstv.com, it's gone. I sometimes type in something, I'm looking up something on Press TV, and I click on the first result on Google because I'm used to it, and it directs me to the URL, which is presstv.com, and it says this domain has been seized. The Biden administration literally used national emergency laws to take Press TV and 30 other outlets down. They call it, unusual and extraordinary threat. I mean, I wear that as a badge of honor. Thank you very much.
That's
seriously, it's crazy.
Seriously. Well, that's what the Lakeland Forward would always tell me, that we wear this Russia label, this Russian dupe label as a badge of honor, because it means that you are saying something that does in fact get under the skin of the establishment. And that's what real independent journalism is about, especially for those of us in the United States and in the Western world.
Well, but if I can just say real quick, Richard was talking about them taking the Press TV website, and it is a concerted effort to do things like make it difficult to look things up on Google. It's not accidental. There seemed to be a very specific time of a few months where they decided that I must have been a threat soon after the 2016 election. And within those couple of months, there was a New York Times hit piece done on me, an NPR hit piece done on me. And basically, and since then, they haven't covered me. So I think those mainstream outlets, I think the main reason they did those in such a short period was so that people who Google me will quickly find anti-Lee Camp articles, and they can reference, you can link to those on Wikipedia. So the Wikipedia entry can also malign me, but you're not allowed to use like RT or anywhere else I am as a source on Wikipedia. You can only use the propaganda sources as sources. So it's kind of like a design to let's make sure his or this outlet's online life is very difficult for users to read or enjoy.
That's
For
wild,
sure.
honestly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I see, people are coming onto the stream. So definitely like this video, like this stream, share it out, and support the show at patreon.com/Danny Haifong. But we're going to move right along. Lee, I want to go back to you, Lee JingJing.
Okay.
And I want to ask this question of everyone. This is very Cold War-esque. This is very McCarthyist in terms of this assault on state-affiliated media, because basically what it's doing is it's claiming that anyone who's any independent voice, and this goes for people who aren't necessarily. Look at what's happened to Julian Assange. He is constantly equated with being some kind of dupe or agent of Russia, and he, along with his those folks, those good folks at WikiLeaks, have all faced this accusation. But I want to get into sort of the impact of this, and Lee JingJing, how has this impacted you? And then maybe all of you can go into like what is the impact of the broader impact of this attack? Because I think that there is something very Cold War like about this, very McCarthyist, and it has a real chilling effect. As much as, of course, I think we all here wear it as a badge of honor, right? These attacks, because it shows we're doing the right thing. But I want to just get a better sense for all of you what your thoughts are about the broader impact of this attack on our journalism and the journalism of those folks who are really trying to provide an alternative to the establishment narrative.
I think it's very dangerous that people are not trying or not willing to hear any positive voices about China, either from China or people saying any positive things about China. It's quite dangerous because I think sometimes I feel people outside of China have a very different perception about China compared to those people who are living in China. And especially if you read mainstream media in America, in the West, I don't know, for those of you who are watching this live stream, I don't know, when you talk about China, what's the first thing pop up in your mind? Is that like kung fu, nice food, or is that a murderous authoritarian state that oppress their people? And sometimes when we go to different countries, you will see people, especially from the Western countries, oh, you're Chinese. They feel like you're probably brainwashed. How do you feel about seeing the democracy, the free world for the first time? But if you talk to the real Chinese people living in China, you will hear a different perception about China. They said, I actually like the government because our life dramatically changed in a better way. Our life improved, especially the bottom 50% life experienced dramatic changes over the past 40 years. But you never hear that. And sometimes there are Chinese saying positive things. You know what? The government is doing great. Last month, there's a story shared by a Tibetan on Chinese network. This Tibetan student who studied in America, and he happened to encounter an American guy saying, "Oh, see, that's what China is doing to Tibet is horrible. Like, these people they can't speak their language, they don't have human rights." And the guy said, "Well, no, I can speak Tibetan perfectly, and our life improved so much. We got out of absolute poverty. It's great." And the American guy said, "There's no way, because all the Tibetans don't agree with you has been murdered." So even with a living Tibetan in front of you saying we are doing okay, they're still like refuse to believe all this. This is what's happening to most of the people. Actually, there are a lot of Chinese people on Twitter or expats living in China on Twitter willing to speak out. They don't want to get into the fight, but they are sick of seeing the constant slanders, misinformation, and spread it not just by trolls with separatists or activists with some evil intentions, but actually especially the mainstream media in China, they are doing the same thing. Because slander China, portraying China as a murderous, no human rights, authoritarian state is the political correctness in the Western culture. You cannot see anything that is good. Because now we are talking, there's a joke on Twitter where saying, whoa, China find a better way to cure cancer faster, but at what cost? well, China ended COVID-19 at what cost? So there's always, that's their
Always.
headline. Always their headline. No matter what you tell us, at what cost? So before the lockdown in Wuhan, after Wuhan was the first city in the world to implement such a lockdown to contain COVID-19. See, they're taking the people's liberty, freedom away, take people's human rights away to do lockdown. And after they couldn't control the COVID-19 back in America, in Europe, see, you guys didn't lock down for soon enough. So everything is your fault.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
So
anyone jump in? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. I just feel it's quite dangerous that people are not willing to hear the positive voices, and those positive voices are, even those are based on facts, but those who saying China is doing horrible things, no matter how ridiculous their story sounds. And there's some testimonies of some witnesses, Uyghur witnesses, being used by AP, by CNN, BBC. This witness has changed her stories 3 times. Every time she got on got interviewed by Vice, by CNN, BBC, every time the story was different and being more exaggerated, and with apparent loopholes. But it doesn't matter. They got big front page, big headlines, but those who are saying from China saying we are okay, but their accounts got shut down. So that's what they're doing. Got social network, got the media flooded with the negative information about China. And I think that's part of the atrocity propaganda, that you have to portray your enemy of doing something horrible, and sometimes with deliberate fabrications. So that's when you want to wage a war against this enemy, it's not just about protecting our country. It's defend human rights, defend freedom. And I think some of the U.S. politicians really want to bring democracy for the Chinese people, especially Mike Pompeo. I think when he was still in the office, I remember one tweet: "We must stand with the Chinese people. We love Chinese people, but it's the CCP that we hate. We should stand with Chinese people." But when Chinese people see that tweet, we were like, "Sure, you care about us."
Yeah.
Last time you cared about people in the Middle East, look what happened to them now. They're still struggling. So Chinese people here really know what they're doing, especially seeing the chaotic year in 2020. Maybe before 2020, there are still some people here have this big American dream, seeing America as the beacon for democracy, for freedom. But 2020 is really the year that people see through, okay, that's just all, it's not democracy, it's hypocrisy.
If I can just add, I absolutely agree with everything Lee just laid out. And recently also with AUKUS, this new military partnership between the UK, Australia, and the US. I mean, Australia has always been basically an unsinkable aircraft carrier for the Americans. They have Pine Gap, this huge spy station there. And now it's going to be even more so. They were going to give, for example, the Americans, they have access to Royal Australian Air Force airfields and some ports, but this is going to increase even more. And they're trying to antagonize China. And then at this, they call it a defensive partnership. They're trying to bring stability to the Indo-Pacific. But then, when anything that China does, someone coughs in China and it's like, oh my God, China is antagonizing Taiwan. They're a threat to the region. They do the same thing with Iran. Iran is a threat to the region. They're a growing power. They use all this language that most people who see a headline, they don't even read the article and read between the lines. They just swallow this, and it's a very dangerous conditioning because it's they dehumanize the enemy essentially, because when it comes time to put sanctions, which not people even in the West even know about or care about, but in the case of war, and I hope, of course, there's no war, it acquiesce, the population acquiesce to this propaganda. It makes it much easier for the politicians to take, actions that are frankly, war crimes, atrocities, crimes against humanity, without people really blinking. You know, they just get conditioned, they get programmed into thinking, yeah, well, those people are not free anyway, or they're not like us, they're not equal to us, and so it's okay to do such and such. And I think it's very dangerous. You know, it's completely racist, xenophobic, and just frankly ignorant and hypocritical. It's really hypocritical because everything they say, I mean, they don't even have this in the West, you know. And I think just the broader implications of these attacks on foreign media is that they don't want the real story getting out. You know, you cannot go against the official narrative. If you're, for example, someone from China who agrees with the narrative that China is a human rights abuser, then CNN and NBC,
you got a job.
There you go. They want to listen to you. And if you're someone from Iran, there was this Iranian woman in the U.S. who said that Iran wanted to kidnap her and then take her in a speedboat to Venezuela. She did an interview on every channel. I mean, it's the most insane plot, you know. And they just swallow this up. And just speaking about Syria, I mean, you know, you cannot say that anything was good, you know, before the war in 2011. You know, you say that there were no power cuts, you know, which I'm telling you, the things were getting better. The last 2 years before the war started, there were no more power cuts in Damascus. You know, the infrastructure was getting better. You can't say this. This is like, are you an Assad supporter? Are you a mouthpiece for the Ba'ath regime? It's impossible. So you have to be like the sheep. You have to swallow the propaganda, and you can't step out of line. And RT and CGTN and Press TV, they give the truth in the English language. You know, it's English language media, and it's showing that everything being reported in the West is wrong. And so that's why they're quote unquote dangerous, and they perceive these outlets as a threat, and they try to silence people because you can't you know, diverge from the official narrative, especially in English language. I mean, this is heresy, and so that's why they go after us.
Yeah, and a lot of what you're speaking to is toxic nationalism, this idea that other countries are evil, we're the good country, and it's you start asking, you know, 3 seconds of questions, and that idea just crumbles. Like, oh, you're telling me every baby in Iran is evil? I mean, and our sanctions, you know, are designed to harm the people. They're not just harming. You think they're harming the 12 rich guys? They're harming the people who get most harmed by sanctions, by economic war, is going to be the poor and the babies and the ill and the elderly. That's who really gets destroyed by economic sanctions. And yet the U.S. has, you know, hundreds of sanctions on various countries, trying to just destroy them and make life as miserable as possible in order to support this toxic nationalist idea that we need to own the world. And if you speak out against this stuff, like you're saying, then you are not welcome on those other networks. And when which they do endlessly, when they report garbage or propaganda or bullshit on these major networks, New York Times, Washington Post, etc., occasionally you might get a tiny retraction, 3 years later, but they know no one's looking at that. They know it has served its purpose. Its purpose was to get people to believe this garbage to begin with. And they also know the most important aspect, which we saw with Russiagate and we've seen with, Syrian chemical weapons attacks and et cetera, is that if you repeat a falsehood enough, people, it's been shown, testing has shown psychologically people confuse familiarity with truth. So if you just keep saying something enough, then people will think it's true. And this goes for people that are, watch my show all the time. My own parents, they'll hear something enough on CNN and they'll be like, well, yeah, but that's probably true, right? And I'll be like, I gave you the information. I debunked all of it. And they're like, yeah, but we've heard it 5 times in a row. How could it possibly be false at that point? It's just so infuriating. I mean, and they leave. One of my favorite things is they'll print this garbage, propaganda garbage. It'd be like, Kim Jong-un assassinated his girlfriend with crocodiles, and then they'll go, oh, never mind. His girlfriend was seen walking around, but they'll leave up the article about how she was killed with crocodiles, and you're like, what? Just so people can keep sharing it for years to come. It's like, how are you not so ashamed that you don't take that article down? It's amazing.
Right. Yeah, right. They did the same thing with Iraq. I mean, we talk about state media. there's nothing more state media than the U.S. corporate media. I mean, corporations and the government in the U.S. are one and the same. The corporations own the government. And you look at the propaganda before the war in Iraq. I mean, there is not one fucking outlet that published any truth about that. You know, like we were saying before, the people who dared to oppose the war got fired. You know, you go on Fox News and Shep Smith is saying like, we bring a little love to the Middle East, you know, and they're cheering on this war. And you go on MSNBC, on CNN, you know, they were repeating every piece of shit that came out of the CIA. If the CIA said the sky is, I don't know, the sky is green, they would say, yes, the sky is green. As the CIA tell us. And they always frame it in a way like, you know, that it's a certainty what the CIA are saying. There's no scrutiny whatsoever. They did this with the anthrax letters as well. I remember this. Turns out it was some guy in the US doing them. And for ages, they're saying, no, but there's this chemical in the anthrax letters that is Saddam Hussein's signature, you know? And so, as Lee was saying, it's the familiarity, you know, they repeat these lies often enough that people believe them. And to this day, we are in 2021 and people still think Iraq had something to do with 9/11. You know, I don't even know for the life of me what the people of Afghanistan had to do with 9/11. You know, if you're mad at the people who caused 9/11, and I think people should be, you should go pay the CIA a visit. But, you know, this really shows you, I think the Iraq War and Russiagate are really the most prime examples, the most potent examples of how there is no scrutiny in the U.S. corporate media. They repeat the lies fed to them by intelligence agencies and other malign actors, to use some of Pompeo's language. And they just don't, you know, they don't question it at all. And then they publish some shitty apology, like, you know, after the country's already been invaded and blown to smithereens. And it's like, well, you know, we didn't apply as much rigor as we should have. Fuck your apology. Why didn't you do your work and then help avoid the war? Maybe, you know, I don't want you to give me an apology afterwards. It's like the BBC, they come and do this documentary last year called Once Upon a Time in Iraq. And I think people should watch it. It's for the most part, it's quite good. It's heartbreaking because they give you these stories from Iraq. And okay, that's great that you're showing what the war in Iraq did to Iraqis, but maybe you shouldn't have been peddling this lie about 45 minutes from attack, you know, the sexed up dossiers, as it's called. You know, they always do it too late, and then they can be like, yes, but you know, we're playing both. We're on, you know, we're not fully wrong. We do take some accountability and show what the war did. It's bullshit, man. The state media, you couldn't have a more potent example of state media than in the West. You just couldn't, you know?
Yeah. And I want to add one more thing. While they are labeling us as state-affiliated media, but those who are actually sponsored by U.S. government and now get this label. For example, Voice of America, VOA, Radio Free Asia. I mean, I got this their website on my computer. They said on their website, like, about us, Radio Free Asia is a private and non-profit corporation founded by the U.S. Congress through the U.S. Agency for Global Media, USNGM, an independent federal government agency that oversees all U.S. civilian international media. And the U.S. AGM, formerly the Broadcasting Board of Governors, is an independent agency of the United States government that broadcasts news and information. And it describes its mission vital to U.S. national interests to inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of their freedom and democracy. They are openly saying they are funded by U.S. government. They don't get a label. And Radio Free Asia, I think they got networks from across the world. Let me go to their page. See, they got Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and they're broadcasting countries including Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, Russia, and Ukraine. Interesting selection of countries, right? All the countries on their hit list. They also got Office of Cuba Broadcasting, Radio Free Asia, Middle East Broadcasting Networks, all funded by the same organization. None of them got the labels. They are apparently funded by the U.S. government. And the stories they broadcast are just absurd. For example, a few months ago, when the Uyghurs in Xinjiang were celebrating the end of Ramadan, when they were dancing in front of the renowned mosques in Kashgar, because dancing was very important culture in Uyghur culture. So before, Radio Free Asia was a Chinese government took away, eradicating the Uyghur culture, eradicating Islam. They're now allowed to celebrate their religious festivals. But last year, when Uyghurs were dancing, celebrating the end of Ramadan, Radio Free Asia said, "Whoa, they're forcing Uyghurs to dance. They're forcing Uyghurs to be happy. That's all paid." I mean, are you listening to yourself? First you said they're eradicating culture. Now you say they're forced to be happy. They're not making any sense. And they got the big coverage and they got big headlines. They don't get the labels. It's just double standard, hypocritical.
Yeah. And that, the more you can dehumanize, I mean, this is part of dehumanizing the countries that, where these outlets derive from, whether it's China, Russia, Iran, we can go down the line, Nicaragua. We've seen hundreds of accounts on Facebook sympathetic to the Sandinistas be taken down over the last week. Steve Sweeney of Morning Star was held in Mexico for 3 days before he could even go to Nicaragua. And, reports were that it was because U.S. government just didn't want him to go, like that. This is a real campaign of suppression. And I think the hypocrisy is very important to touch on, because not only does it undo the narratives behind what justifies this policy, but it also exposes the real criminality that those who are taking part in this censorship, the major corporations, the military industrial complex, the US, UK, the Western governments, they're really trying to hide their own criminality as well. But anyway, whoever wants to jump in should jump in.
No, I couldn't agree more. And the thing with the UK, I think something that is emblematic of hiding criminality. You look at the last 2 years, especially the last 2 years, how the Zionist lobby, the Israeli lobby, has really, just increased, tightened its stranglehold over British politics. They ran this smear campaign against Jeremy Corbyn. All the major outlets ran with it. All of them. They all accepted this narrative that he was an anti-Semite, and he's been a lifelong anti-racist activist. Jeremy Corbyn, you're really grasping at straws here. And so they were painting him as a racist, and because he supported Palestine and he wanted to implement a socialist agenda in the Labour Party. You can't do that. That's not allowed. And so this shows you again how the media, they all cooperate to character assassinate someone, and they work actively to hide the criminality of the Israeli occupation, which is of course funded by the United States and created by the United Kingdom. And so this was really emblematic of how much control they have over British politics, British media. And I mean, just last month, you have Professor David Miller, who teaches at Bristol University. I interviewed him about this. He got fired. He got fired from Bristol University. Same thing. They had this smear campaign against him, calling him an anti-Semite, just for criticizing Israel, right? So they managed to kick him out of the university after 2 years of complaints, even though a lawyer, like a solicitor, found no wrongdoing and no racism on his part.
And
so
Cornell, Professor Cornell West couldn't get tenure at Harvard.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there you go. There you go. So, I mean, this shows you that you have a media that serves, very big criminal enterprises, be it corporations or, people like Saudi Arabia or the Israeli occupation, or committing genocide, who are murdering, oppressing, brutalizing people on a daily basis. And this is state media at the end of the day. You can't come here and tell me that this is an objective, an objective apparatus or establishment. It's just ridiculous. And, if other countries, are dictatorships, according to the West, they say that Iran and Syria and all these dictatorships. I mean, they couldn't dream of having such a complex propaganda apparatus. If they're so good at this, why is the whole world trying to get rid of them and justify sanctions against them, justify all kinds of atrocities and decades of war, decades of sanctions. it's really important to understand the agenda here, and the agenda is that keep imperialism going, keep the corporate profits going, and dehumanize people. And I think it's also inherently messed up that they think that in Saudi or in Syria or in Iran or China, that it's all state media, like as if the people there are so stupid that they would fall victim to whatever is broadcast on the television. The irony here that that's the case in the West, if we're going to be real here, because you just can't compete. You can't compete with that kind of propaganda apparatus. It's really incredible. It's consider it a PR department of the military industrial complex, because there's no shortage of funders from the weapons manufacturers. And of course, we can go into pharmaceuticals and so on. But, I just think it's ridiculous how they project. It's really a lot of projection onto other countries.
And besides many other reasons that it's been useful for America to malign and use propaganda against other countries, one of the biggest ones might be that it's just much easier to keep the citizenry in line, to justify, unlimited surveillance and a police officer on every corner. You kind of can't justify all that shit without saying that there are evil people trying to get you. And so they kind of have to jump from one country to another. The Russians are going to get you. The Iranians are going to get you. Now it's the Cubans. Cubans have a sound weapon they're going to hit you with and give you a headache for a week. Oh my God, it's awful. They've got to have something to scare people into accepting such an oppressive society of the largest police force in the world, the largest prison state in the world. People start asking questions if they aren't afraid of the great other.
Yeah. And, this hypocrisy, I mean, we can go over so many examples. It just, to think that the United States, especially, let's center on the United States, because the United States has been leading this. It's a war. It really is an information war that the United States is waging. When you are able to unilaterally take down accounts, when you're able to take domains, as Richard, you mentioned, take the domain of Press TV, when you're able to use this vast corporate media apparatus to suppress independent journalism, what is that other than censorship? It is blatant censorship, and we are in, I think, this very it's very dangerous new Cold War moment that I think is really fueling all of this. It began with Russiagate, now it's Chinagate. China's the worst, and it does follow quite neatly from the war on terror, because the war on terror, as you mentioned, Lee, about this unending surveillance, that's really where it began in the United States. And it has affected the media. Now we see this military to corporate media, intelligence kind of revolving door that exploded during the war on terror, and it's only getting worse. And I think it's just so important to highlight this hypocrisy, because we have the United States ready to kill one of the most important journalists of our generation, Julian Assange, ready to extradite him, while claiming that Chinese media, Iranian media, Russian media is somehow undermining American democracy. First of all, what democracy? And second of all, the United States right now is undermining itself in so many respects, because you don't even have corporate media. No one in the corporate media is willing to speak up about this. So let's talk about that. Who's speaking up about this? I feel like this is not a subject that people really want to touch. It has impacts. Luckily this channel is even monetized, so whatever. But at the end, there are impacts to this, and people. And as I said before, a chilling effect has kind of taken hold here. So whatever reactions you have, we have about 10 more minutes, and I know you all got a lot to do. It's early and late in certain areas. So.
In terms of the impact on journalists, I've seen. I've been lucky that I can continue to have a career, but I've seen so many. I guess we used to call them citizen journalists, but independent journalists that can't make a living any longer, have kind of given up. Even if they're still doing it, they're hardly seen by anybody. It's really crushed independent journalism in so many ways. And there's also a great deal of self-censorship that I think is going on now among many independent journalists, because they're like, well, if I put Israel in the title of a video, no one's going to see it. Or if I put it in the description, or if I even just do a video on Israel, or if I, my co-host of my podcast, Graham Elwood, was probably demonetized for covering Jeffrey Epstein. So, people are like, well, I can't talk about Epstein. And it's just, there's a lot of whether I think a lot of independent media, independent journalists want to admit it or not, there's a lot of self-censorship of where the topics they're heading towards. They're going to head more towards the topics that are allowed and that get a lot of views, as opposed to the topics that get them suppressed and demonetized and could even get their channel deleted. So, I think that is not discussed enough. It's easy to discuss the channels that have been deleted and, straight up banned, but a lot of people are not mentioning that people just don't want to talk about Israel anymore because their videos will get taken down or demonetized.
Yeah.
And I also want to add, because the journalists who were feeding on this U.S. diplomacy, foreign policy, they get more views, clicks for their stories with fabrications, with fake evidence. But those stories have serious consequences, because they will eventually lead to, for example, sanctions. And it's working towards towards wars, but we haven't reached wars yet. But we're seeing some consequences. For example, they are talking about how Xinjiang used forced labor in cotton industry, which is not if you go to Xinjiang, Xinjiang, because of the geological conditions, they produce the best quality of cottons, and all the farmers have their own plot of lands. It's their own land. It's their major, probably only source of income for many local farmers. So by making this claim, and all this CNN, BBC are feeding off this fake stories, the people, Uyghur people and all other ethnic minority people in Xinjiang are facing the serious problem. Their cottons can't be sold to anywhere else, because China is the major exporter for cottons, providing cottons for all these major brands that we saw, like Nike and Skechers. But suddenly the farmers are already seeing these consequences. They cannot sell their cottons. How can they make a life without this income? So it has this. So those people who are claiming we care about people in China, we care about the Uyghur human rights, those who claim they care the human rights are doing the most horrendous crimes by putting those people back into poverty. So that will create chaos, create unemployment. China just finished this lifted people out, 2 million people in Xinjiang, lifted 2 million people in Xinjiang out of absolute poverty. So that's why, also the de-radicalization, people finally have a stable life, to have a job, to live peacefully. But now what the US government is doing, in the name of freedom and democracy, is putting those people back into poverty, create instability, create chaos. So the terrorist groups like ETNM, TIP can recruit those people who are struggling financially. So that has serious, dangerous consequences.
Meanwhile, it's still legal to have slaves in the United States as long as they're prisoners.
There you go.
13th Amendment. Exactly.
So if I can just add, because you mentioned Julian Assange, I mean, man, I've been covering the extradition hearing since the beginning, and I can just tell you one thing, that this is unbelievably chilling. What they're trying to do, they're really, I'm seeing this in the court. They're really extraterritorializing U.S. law in central London, and I mean, this is scandalous, And what's so worrisome is that the judge, when she blocked the extradition, she did it on health grounds, which seems great on the surface. But last week we had the High Court appeal, and I knew this was coming, but we really saw in court why this was so bad that she only blocked on health grounds. She agreed with all the political crap. You know, the Espionage Act, there's 17 charges under that. There's another one for conspiracy to commit computer hacking. And the judge, in her ruling, she basically equated everything that he did as a crime in the UK, you know, and she used the Official Secrets Act. So, I mean, the precedent that this sets is
and
astronomically bad.
The main witness is admit he made it all up.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's one thing. And then, of course, we have the Yahoo News story that the CIA is basically, you know, what was planning to potentially kill him and kidnap him. But on top of that, you can see in the last months, Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, she's gone and pushed the Official Secrets Act. You know, she's making it even worse. You know, they want to give journalists like 14 years in jail, and they are basically criminalizing national security journalism. I did a bunch of reporting on this. It's so bad. And I can't put it into words how catastrophic this is. And honestly, this whole idea that, you know, we're having outlets. I mean, I cover Julian Assange extensively on every platform I can, so the message reaches as many people as possible. How the hell is that being a mouthpiece for be it Iran or Russia or whatever? These channels are a mouthpiece for me, you know, if we're going to be cheeky, because my point is that I've been given a megaphone and I'm using it to spread the message, because the message hasn't changed, you know. If, of course, you see someone and then changes up, well, okay, you know, that could maybe be a valid criticism. But this whole idea that, you know, because of the platform you're on, that the message is bad. No, this is not true. You should always focus on the message, what's being said, and then address that, you know. Otherwise, it's just personal attacks and trying to change the subject. And, you know, it's weak. It doesn't address the topic at hand. And I really don't know what the future holds. I can just say one thing, that the Trump administration, you know, they put sanctions on Iran, basically saying that Press TV and other channels that are under IRIB are controlled by the Iranian Republican Revolutionary Guard Corps, right? So the IRGC. And Google ended up banning Press TV from YouTube and like every Google service. I even think like Google Calendars, like they can't use it, you know? And then Biden gets into office, and what does Biden do? He acts on these sanctions, the same ones that Trump put in place, to do what we talked about, to steal the domains of Press TV and 30 other outlets that are also Arabic language and English language. And so, you know, once again, where's the difference here between Biden and Trump? You know, they're shitting on the press. They're shitting on the press. There's no difference between them, you know. And of course, the persecution of Julian Assange, they're just going straight for, you know, they're running with it. And I mean, I knew this would happen. I think we all predicted this, but of course, they're not too many people want to listen, right? Instead, they just yell at us that, oh, you're state media.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, I want to say something. I want to say one thing, because we're hitting towards the close. I definitely want all of your closing, you know, any remarks, anything that you have, any thoughts that you didn't get out that you want to get out. I definitely want all of you to go around. I want to say something broader, you know, in terms of the broader movement for peace, for justice, the broader movement to ensure that the truth, the information that people need gets to them so that they can act on it and truly end, you know, this regime of endless war, this regime of endless austerity, all the exploitation and oppression that happens in the world because of the United States government, its allies. One thing that really concerns me about this attack is that people such as yourselves, right? Your work is delegitimized. All of the courageous work. I mean, you guys are examples of what journalism should be. Richard, your work on Julian Assange, like doing something that very few are willing to do. Mainstream press, independent press, cover this issue, which is such a monumental one. Lee Camp, all of the work you've done around imperialism, your activism, your journalism, all of it centers on peace and centers on, you know, the courage of you being a part of the embassy protectors, you know, during the siege on Venezuela that was occurring, both here in the United States, which with the seizure of embassies, and as well abroad, you know, in Venezuela, the proxy wars. And then Li JingJing, you're going around your own country, the country that you call your home, trying to expose Westerners, Americans, of the real China in a time where that's a dangerous thing to do. I mean, that is at this moment where the xenophobia, the new Cold War is such at this height. I could see why that would be something that's difficult. People might feel a little bit worried about doing that because of the assault that the U.S. media government are conducting. So, one of the most frustrating things is that it's this kind of work that is suppressed in the places where it is needed most to get out. And that's one of the major points I wanted to highlight in this panel, in this conversation, because it really is egregious and criminal. And we all, I know all of us here are on this side, on the correct side, but we are really in this to convince others to fight this siege. But for those of you who are watching this, please like, share, support the show at patreon.com/DannyHaiFong. And now I want to get to your closing remarks. Anything that you want to say to close this thing out? Each of you definitely jump in and please, last words.
Yeah, I think we're in dire times. One thing you can say is it's an exciting time to be alive. We're in dire times. We're at a fork in the road. Thanks to climate change, the planet is heating up exponentially fast. We've lost 50% of all wildlife over the past 40 years. And what we need in order to deal with that is massive cooperation, global cooperation on a level we've maybe never seen before. And instead, what many countries and many media outlets are pushing is this endless war, endless strife, endless belligerence against other countries, against other peoples. We got to see past toxic nationalism and towards a global cooperation to deal with climate change, as if this, America shifted their entire production base, their entire way of life to deal with World War II. It needs to be on that level, but for the globe. And in order to do that, we got to get past the endless hatred of each other and the endless scaremongering and jingoistic garbage. And in order to do that, I think you got to stop watching your corporate media that is pushing those viewpoints, that's pushing those ideas. We have to wake up and get the fuck out of this mentality, this social engineering that makes people hate someone from another country. We need global cooperation. And so, it's an honor to be on here with you three because you're doing such amazing work. But yeah, I think that is why right now is such an important time for, media that is outside of what is considered allowable for the corporate state.
Yeah. Li, JingJing, how about you follow up?
I think I want to say, like before, we were lied with this Naira testimony. We were all with this lied with this false testimony, and then led to this became the justification for the war on Iraq and led to chaos. That so many people died. And over the past few decades, we saw so many wars, sanctions across the world that caused damage, that caused people's lives. And are you still willing to be lied again? And when talking about the human rights in China or in Xinjiang or Muslims, the Western countries are crying much louder than Muslim majority countries. Doesn't that raise alarm? So I think people just think about it. When you hear countries like Russia, China, Afghanistan, Cuba, or doing horrendous things, think about it. You are not the, the defender of human rights. You are not the one that brings justice to other people. You need to hear and listen people actually from there, live there. What's their view? And compare, because you've been lied to before. You don't want to be lied to again that have serious consequences. So, and especially after 2020, all countries got our internal affairs to be fixed. Every country was struggling with COVID, with financial crisis, with everything else. It's the time that we fix internal questions rather than fixing vilify other countries, bring justice to other countries. Fix your own shit before you talk about others. So yeah, so I hope people are willing to, you don't have to really believe all of us, just to take a look what's inside China, what people inside Iran, inside Russia, what those people are thinking. So hear different sides of the story rather than just believing the mainstream media.
Richard, close us. Well, close us out. I'll stay on for a few more minutes, but close the panel out, please. Oh no, he can't hear you.
You're muted, Richard.
Or not. I don't see him muted.
I don't know if it's working now.
There you go.
It is,
Okay.
yes.
So you know, like I was saying, the PR department of the weapons manufacturers, it's the mainstream media, it's the Western corporate media, and they literally kill people. They manufacture consent for sanctions, if they even talk about sanctions. They'll do reports like, oh, the economic situation in Syria is dire, and then they don't even mention the fact that it's sanctions and 10 years of war. And same thing about Venezuela and so on. And they manufacture consent for sanctions, and then worse shit as well. Like we were talking about the war in Iraq, and the war on terror in general. The war on terror is still continuing, by the way. I don't know why people think that Afghanistan is like, oh yeah, everything's done now. It's fucking not. I can tell you that. And the problem here is that we have hypocrisy. Of an astronomical order. They talk about human rights. Man, look at the United States. What human rights? They're still treating African Americans and basically anyone who isn't fully 100% white like second, third rate citizens. As we were just pointing out, the U.S. has the world's largest prison population. I mean, how are you going to talk about people being jailed in JingJing or persecuted in political dissidents being persecuted in Iran when you're doing that in the U.S., and not just in the U.S., they're going to the U.K. now to jail Julian Assange. They come and talk about press freedoms in Syria, press freedoms in Iran, press freedoms in Russia, in China. Motherfucker, the only reason you have a so-called free press in the U.S. is because everyone's in cahoots working with the same narrative. That's the only, there's nothing free about it in terms of, where it's going. And the hypocrisy about, this military has committed war crimes. They always blame Syria for carrying out war crimes, and the chemical weapons fiasco, another lie. I mean, the United States bombed Iraq so bad. The city of Fallujah is basically radioactive. It has higher rate of birth defects than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where 2 nukes were dropped. These are atrocities that are untold. People they literally untold, because they never talk about these things in the media. So everything that they say about other countries, about not having a free press, about abusing human rights, about war crimes, they're doing it, and doing it to a much higher degree. And this is true of the United States, just as it's true of the United Kingdom. The US is basically just an extension of the British Empire. It's on steroids. So this is really important to point out. And I couldn't agree more with what my esteemed colleagues, Lee and Lee said just now, that you have to listen to the people in these countries, in China, in Iran. You can't just take the word of some, motherfucker over at CNN who's platforming, if they're even platforming someone from that country, but platforming always just, surely a dissident or someone who has a vested interest in telling lies and skewing the narrative. So I think this is really important. People need to unplug. They need to take their heads out of their asses and stop listening to, Sky News and the BBC. They've got it wrong. Every single time they got it wrong. They got it wrong with Russia. They got it wrong with Iraq. They got it wrong with Afghanistan, with Syria. Every goddamn time they got it wrong. Why would you trust these people in a million years? And so I just want to close by saying thank you for having me on, Danny. Thank you for having us on. And it's such a pleasure to be with you three. Really, I couldn't, I'm so proud of your work. I'm so proud of what you guys are doing. And keep up the amazing job. Really, like we're saying, we need independent media more than ever. And, what you guys are doing is really good. If it wasn't good, if it wasn't the right thing, they wouldn't be working so hard to try to silence it, right?
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, thanks so much, Richard. And everyone, round of applause to our esteemed panel, as Richard put it. I'll be on for a few more minutes to close the whole stream out, but really, guys, everyone follow these really incredible journalists, activists. They're doing the real work out here. But yeah, it was really amazing to be with all of you. I think, of course, we'll all either collectively or in another capacity be, I'm sure, together again, talking about this shit, because this is going to continue, and that's one of the things we have to really come to terms with, because that's the reality. And now we have to work around this. We have to fight this, and we have to come together as independent journalists in the media to continue to ensure that people are turning off the corporate media, the whatever they're doing now, streaming everywhere where they are, that people are turning that off and coming to people like us to get a different perspective that just so happens to be a more truthful one about the real roots of these issues that we're talking about. So thanks so much, Lee JingJing, Richard, for being on with me today. And take care.
Thank you.
Take care, Danny. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
Bye. Good night, everyone. All right. So that was the esteemed panel that I had on. So for all of you who are not familiar with this program, this is the Internationalist transmission. This is episode 3, the state-affiliated media panel. To support the show, you can go to patreon.com/DannyHaiFong and do so at whatever amount, because that really helps keep this kind of media going as I do this work on a more full-time basis. And I look forward to collaborating with Lee JingJing, with Lee Camp, with Richard Medhurst more in the future. They really worked around a lot of time zone issues. Those of you in the East Coast know. Those of you who are in the Western Hemisphere in the East Coast know that daylight savings time ended, so we went an hour back. Richard was airing at midnight. Lee JingJing is like the beginning of the day for her. So, very early in the morning. I think that this went very successfully. Their insights are so critically important. So follow all of them. And again, like, share, make sure you subscribe to this channel, support the show at patreon.com/DannyHaiFong. And I'll be with you all for about another 5 more minutes. I think one of the things that I really do get out of doing media work is this critically important task that is at hand, which is the ideological struggle, the propaganda struggle. So propaganda, of course, when we're using it in regards to the establishment, it is a very negative thing. That's what we were talking about today. We're talking about the propaganda apparatus, the corporate media, the Western media, basically attacking any independent journalists, using these McCarthyist attacks and smears as a way to control the narrative. While we could call it propaganda because we are trying to send a message, but our message is not to deceive the people. It's not to deceive masses of people into supporting wars or to being okay with, or at least swallowing, austerity or neoliberalism or exploitation. It's to move people in the direction of fighting those things, of waging a struggle for peace, not war, waging a struggle against climate change rather than climate catastrophe, waging a struggle for socialist democracy rather than capitalist autocracy. That's what we are all trying to do in some form or another. And regardless of disagreements, one thing we can all hopefully agree upon is that this attack on independent media, whether we're looking at Julian Assange's case, whether we're looking at the state-affiliated media label that we're getting, whether we're looking at how those of us on the left are being paired in with the so-called alternative sources on the right as some kind of red-brown alliance so that we can be suppressed all the same and push us down in the algorithm. I think this fight, I don't call it a fight for free speech. I call it for the right to be able to do this work free from imperialist attack, which requires us not just to label this hypocrisy, name it, and expose it, but it requires us to understand the system that is committing these attacks. This system of empire, of imperialism, of capitalism, of white supremacy. This attack on state-affiliated media, it is racist in character because it's going after countries that the United States dehumanizes to the minds of the masses of people in the US and the West, so that things like sanctions, things like military escalations, things like outright interventions or proxy wars are digestible to the general population. And we see this in relation to so many questions. We saw it during the Trump administration and into the Biden administration, this rise in xenophobia. We've seen the whole Democratic Party apparatus, even at the grassroots, become enamored with this Russiagate conspiracy and literally vote along these lines. Forget the issues, right? Forget about censorship. Forget about economic inequality. Forget about peace. People in the Democratic Party have been convinced that Russia is the boogeyman and that Russia is everywhere. I mean, my interaction with Keith Olbermann is part and parcel of this. He's a Russiagate fanatic, and he has a whole program on GQ where he basically talks about Russia, Russia, Russia all the time. He did that throughout the Trump administration, called for outright censorship, told Twitter that Jimmy Dore should be censored, has done this to countless others. And lo and behold, he's likely the culprit of the fact that I'm locked out of my account for, I think, another 5 or 6 hours because I responded to him. He was getting ratioed like crazy for claiming that Wyatt Reed was a whore for a dictator, for dictators, because he's covering Nicaragua and the elections there. And meanwhile, this guy used the same language, wasn't censored, and he has called for censorship before and has literally been spreading Russophobia on Twitter. He literally said on Twitter that he is ashamed of his Russian heritage. I mean, this is how, because of Putin or something or other like that. I mean, this is how low it gets. And we're at this very low point in this society in the United States. It's a crisis point. It's a crisis of legitimacy. And the American ruling class is attempting to do anything it can to maintain control of the narrative and also maintain control of this system, because the political system is rupturing. Trump, Bernie Sanders, you have people moving in all sorts of directions politically. Look at the latest poll numbers for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. The center is not holding. People do not want neoliberalism, endless war. They don't want it, in the same old way that they've had it. They're looking for alternatives. And the suppression of us, of people like myself, Li JingJing, of people like Lee Camp, of people like Richard Medhurst, it's all about ensuring that we do not offer any kind of ideological alternative, any kind of information alternative for those who are seeking it. So that's why it's so important to really counter this. And I make the point in an article that I wrote for Black Agenda Report about independent media being a political act in and of itself, is that the attack on so-called state-affiliated media, foreign media in Russia, China, Iran, elsewhere, Cuba, Nicaragua, elsewhere, it's really an attack on publicly funded media, because that's what we're talking really about here. We're talking about countries like China, Russia, and Iran, which do not allow private big monopolies to control the media space. And that is one of the underlying factors driving this. That's not talked about enough, because I saw some people in the chat talk about, the Telecommunications Act of 1996, this descent into further privatization and monopolization of the entire media space, to the point where we can't really operate in it. No one from the New York Times and CNN is coming to us looking for us to provide the information that we do in the so-called paper of record. No, they're going to the CIA, they're going to their intelligence pals, they're going to the military-industrial complex in order to forward these narratives. They're going to their corporate paymasters, wherever they are, to get the establishment narrative so that they can continue to churn through this propaganda. So without further ado, though, I really appreciate all of you coming on. I'm going to end it here. It is about dinner time out here on the East Coast of the United States. I really want to salute to all of my panel guests today and to all of you viewers for coming out to this incredible panel, this great conversation that I hope will be ongoing in some respects. And you can definitely continue to tune in to the Internationalist transmission right here on this YouTube channel. So make sure that you go to the Left Lens YouTube, you subscribe, you share, you like this. And of course, I'll say it one more time, independent media needs support from readers, from followers, from viewers, because as we have made very clear, the corporate media and the establishment is not going to do that for us. So with that said, you can support my work at patreon.com/DannyHaiFong. It's in the description, where you can support this work, and you can look forward to more episodes of this program, my writing, which I do on basically a weekly basis, and other projects that I have going on, other things I have going on in the struggle for peace, justice, socialism, and a new world. So thank you all so much for coming on again, and peace out.